Oh, that's interesting.
Hello, all, and welcome to this week's exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. Um, the blob of black on the screen is my co-host Witan Svan joining us tonight. Um, Due to a couple of things, it's been a month since we've had Svan on the program. Um, Whatever you moved is still there. So, anyways, welcome tonight. We are going to cover a couple of different a number of different poems in the tail end of the Poetic Edda. Um, there's a lot of little short ones towards the end there, and so we're going to work through a few of them in the time that we have with you guys tonight. Uh, but first, some kind of top of the show news. We are all extremely excited about the dedication of Phrasehoff coming up on December the 6th. So if you guys are able, we would love to have you join us there. It is in Austintown, Ohio, and it's amazing. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to be there as we present the Hoff to Lord Freyr and dedicate it and inaugurate our first ritual there in that Hoff and really, really solidify its existence here in Midgard. And it's a pretty special thing. I got a chance to visit last month to visit the Hoff site. The building is great. The property is great. The location is great. Everything about it is fantastic. And I'm very excited to get to be there for it. The McNallans are also going to make it out for the dedication. So it's an opportunity to meet our founder, Steve McNallan, and his lovely wife, Sheila McNallan, and a number of other members of AFA leadership that will be in attendance. So again, if you're able to make it, we would love to see you guys there. If you're interested, contact your local folk builder and they can get you all set up. Other news and things, speaking of Phrasehoff, we continue to make amazing progress towards paying that Hoff off. We have not even had the dedication yet, and we are 30% paid off, which is fantastic. It means we got 87,433 remaining. So that's just about $116 per member would pay it off immediately. And that is tremendous progress, with this relatively short amount of time we've had the Hoff. So thank you guys all for your generosity. Speaking of generosity, GW Farnsworth, as always, starts us off with a $25 donation to this program and a $20 donation towards the payoff of Phrasehoff. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. And also in Phrasehoff news, as of today, the Phrasehoff website is officially a thing and live. So you want to check that out at phrasehoff.org. So that people know, do we have a map to pull up of what the Phrasehoff district entails? So all of that in the very, very pale blue is Phrasehoff district. West Virginia sits kind of oddly in it, and a lot of how we determined that was on road time with the mountain range going through there. It changes kind of what's closer to what, but that is the new Phrasehoff district, also including, oh wow, that is the global projection of Phrasehoff district. So yeah, check it out. If you are in that district, here's your website. It'll have a calendar of your local events and things going on. And yeah, just one more time, we'd love to see everybody at the dedication. Svan is making his way up there soon to paint Frey's mural in his Hoff. So I'm very, very excited to see what Svan is able to produce for us. And I'm also excited for Svan to get to check out the Hoff. It's really cool, and I think he'll be really impressed. Yeah, that's what we've got at the top of the show. Svan, is there anything folks need to know before we dive into the first of our poems for the evening?
Just making sure that the order that I have kind of set up in my head is the same as we're doing Brynhilda's Ride to Hell as the
Yes.
first one.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this one specifically kind of lays to rest all of the lore that we've been covering, but in an interesting way, and brings up a lot of good points about the far more clear sense of the afterlife that Asatru has, rather than I think what a lot of people have kind of presented it with Asatru and the afterlife. It's always kind of struck me as a maelstrom of information, and far less definitive than I think a lot of people want. And it also, I think some people have kind of made up things, kind of pulling from the Egyptians and all of that. So I find it very interesting. And here we do get a chance to see the glimpse of the poetic explanation of Brynhild's ride to the underworld, to the place of the souls, the collective domain, the protected domain of the souls. And it naturally adds context and extra movement towards explaining, justifying, and even still allowing Brynhild to throw some extra attitude on this situation, as she was seen as a villain ultimately. And I'm not saying that there's a justification that she makes, but it's just another lattice work of her reasoning. And it really kind of goes away from what we are used to today in modern age, where they'll present a villain and the villain doesn't believe that they're a villain, and they're actually a good guy, and they are doing this because of they're ignorant, or that it's the thing that they need to do in order to make things right. I really got that this is about the word, about the oath, about reacting properly. It was and I say that tentatively because again, people could take this subjectively, but the slice of this in ethics at the time shows again a completion of fate, a part fit with the rest of the puzzle pieces, and it wasn't done ignorantly, and it wasn't done in the sense that somehow, some way, in her mind, everything was right, or was she needed to make it right, and whether or not everyone around her didn't understand or not, that didn't matter. And the reality of it is that she was simply wronged, and then all of her actions were kind of in retribution to being wronged. When people broke their oaths, when people tricked her, she reacted in the way where she was kind of leveling, or it's like she was going for dharma, but without the idea of modern consequence or modern ethics involved. It was kind of a you struck me, so I strike you. And I think that it's really important for the audience to think about how, one, our ethics change. There are things that are perennial, but there are also things that are subjective, and it is based on our time. And I'm sure that the way that our ancestors were in the Bronze Age may have evolved until the time of the late Nordic period. So because they're dealing with things, and so this story takes place amongst the Goths, but is being spoken during the late Viking Age or Nordic Age, and you can kind of see how some of that plays out, and where it's painstakingly detailed. And I think it's important that we look at that, see them in their slices of time, realize that our ancestors did not have to deal with things that we deal with today, and learn the lessons within the frame. And then the application of today may be different. So I think that's something I wanted to kind of emphasize. Also, too, the narrative story of traversing and going into the land of the dead is also very telling. It gives an idea of the way our ancestors saw that heaven wasn't just Ausgarður, but Ausgarður was a building or a domain within heaven to our ancestors. And I think it should still remain this understanding. And the same with Niflheim or Helgarður, and the idea of the boundaries of the domicile that is Ausgarður does not make the entirety of the heavenly domains, but instead it is seen as an expanse or a realm of its own type of reality. So,
all right. Well, anybody who is following along with us this evening, it's at voluspow.org. And yeah, whenever you would like, if you could take us through the Helreið Brynhildar.
Right, the ride to hell of Brynhild. And I think it's also important, we've talked about this before, hell, not only the Ausvenir of death, allocated, giving protection over the souls of men, being the least dangerous, is placed farthest away in the first realm, the low realm, where the taproot of Yggdrasil is, and the first well that spawns the rivers but it's almost completely synonymous with death in and of itself. The idea of walking the hell road was death. Having the Hellblau cloak was the blood settling in the back. So when we read in certain sagas, the usage of the word hell is very, very loose. It's not just simply referring. It's almost very similar to the usage of the word Yarth, or it's spelled Jorth, the goddess of the earth. But there are different times in which it's focused as the being and as the result of the being's domain in life. So, and again, it is a short poem. So we're doing multiple poems tonight too, right?
Yes, we're doing 3.
Right. So, and they're just boom, boom, boom. So, easy to kind of move from one to the other. So, we shall start with the introduction, in which they say, after the death of Brynhild, there were made 2 bale fires instead of bon or boon fires. These are the ones of woe. There's one for Sigurd, and that burned first, and on the other was Brynhild burned, and she was on a wagon which was covered with rich cloth. Thus it is told that Brynhild went in the wagon on Hell Way and passed by a house, and there dwelt a certain giantess, and the giantess spoke. So I think it is interesting to note that death and travel, whether by boat or wagon, there is a symbolic sense, sometimes both. I believe the Osberg ship has a woman, she is buried, but in a wagon on the boat. So the transitional space of that is definitely emphasized. And I think the gods, the Vanir, the waning gods, and a wain is a wagon, being the gods of natural law, is that this cycle is part of the natural cycles of the life. And the ones that truly broke it for humanity, the folk, to exist in a different cycle than just regular animals, are the Aesir gods. So, but the combination is still there. So he is burned, and then she is burned, and now she's traveling on her own. And the giantess says to her, "Thou shalt not further forward fare. My dwelling ribbed with rocks across, more seemly it were at thy weaving to stay, than another's husband here to follow." So right away, she's speaking about her dwelling. Her dwelling, most likely with the stones across, is a barrow mound. And we also see this with in Volaspau, that Lord Odin draws forth a giantess from her burial. And the comparisons of this is that in Niflhel, there is where things reside after death. And then Helgarður is an encapsulated place with the specific function of protecting the human souls, the ancestors, and where they're at from the spiritual landscape around. So she kind of veils a insult and says, it would have been better for you to stay weaving than to follow another woman's husband into the land of the dead. So then she says, what wouldst thou have from Valand here, fickle of heart, in this my house? Gold goddess, now, if thou wouldst know, hero's blood from thy hands hast washed. So, again, veiled threats. Bear in mind, too, Valand is, so far as I know, and I've been kind of looking into it, is utilized throughout all the poems that we've spoken of as a sacred land or a special place, but is not actually correlated with any historical place that we know of. And she's not talking about any supernatural place. So the only thing I could find is the possibility that it is the land or the tribal land in which the Gutans or the Goths had set out in Eastern Europe, but I'm not 100% on that. So Brynhild then retorts, chide me not, woman, from the rocky walls. Though to battle once I was wont to go, better than thou I shall seem to be, when men us two shall truly know. The giantess speaks back, thou wast Brynhild, Buthli's daughter. For the worst of evils born in the world, to death thou hast given Giuki's children and laid their lofty house full low. So, one, she knows about the things going on in Midgard. She knows about these things, and there is an inherent connection. We speak about this with the wells, and Urd's well being the source well. And if it is the source well in heaven, then Mimir's well being the well of memory, and then Furugelmur being the kind of last and final place of descent. Everything seems to be this kind of motion of slowly working its way down. But she says you killed Giuki's children, which of course are the brothers, the three brothers, who ultimately tricked and made Sigurd jump the fire and trick her. So she knows of great detail. Brynhild speaks, truth from the wagon, here I tell thee, witless one, if know thou wilt, how the heirs of Giuki gave to me joyless ever a breaker of oaths. And of course, she is referring to the fact that Sigurd was tricked to being disguised and impersonating. And that right there, on top of kind of turning on him and in a murderous intent, ultimately kind of damned them as well. So, let's see here. Brynhild speaks. Hild, the helmed, in Hlimdalr, they named me of old, all they who know me. Now, this section is missing because of eligibility of the writing, or the legibility. Stanza 7, though, she does continue, but she marks that she was once known simply as Hild of Hlimdalr. And this is interesting because we've been talking about how the Valkyrie in mortal sense to divine sense and then returning to mortal sense. So she's speaking of being someone, and she doesn't make reference to the fact that she's the daughter of the Goths, or of the Huns. And then when she returns, she becomes mortal again as punishment. The monarch bold, the swan robes bore of the sisters 8 beneath an oak. 12 winters I was, if know thou wilt, when oaths I yielded the king so young. So 8 of her Valkyrie sisters were donning robes and had taken them off, and they were taken, and she was married off to a young king, but she was young herself. And I don't know, because there's no other hinting towards the idea of the mortal souls becoming or growing up to be Valkyrie. But it's just, again, very interesting. Or I think more importantly, since she's bringing this up as a sense of tragedy, that she's justifying herself. What this really does point out is youthful marriages at that age were seen culturally as not good. And that's why she's bringing it up. Along her list, the first thing she says is, "Oh, I was betrothed to marriage through trickery after they stole my swan robes at the age of 12." And that lends to the idea that our ancestors looked at that being unacceptable or not good. So then she says, "Next, I let the leader of the Goths, Hjálmgunr the Old, go down to hell, and victory brought to Auða's brother. For this was Odin's anger mighty." And that's where we have this point. Even though she's now trapped in Midgard, she's still dictating the fates of warriors. And she knew that Auða's brother was supposed to lose, and Hjálmgunr was destined to live, but instead she did the opposite, and that made Lord Odin upset at her. "He beset me with shields in Skatalund, red and white, their rims overlapping. He bade that my sleep should broken be by him only who fear had nowhere found." So no one would wake her up until there was some prince or noble or warrior who knew no fear. And here we kind of see the essence of the sleeping princess, if you will, in general terms with Western stories. It's all here as well, except instead of a kiss, it is no fear or be incinerated. He let around my hall in the southward looked, the branches foe, which is fire, high leaping burn. Across it he bade the hero come, who brought me the gold that Fafnir guarded. So she, until the decree of Lord Odin, none would cross that fiery expanse until the one who had no fear, and that was Sigurd. On Grani rode the giver of gold. Again, the reference to a ring giver or a giver of gold or a gift giver is always kind of allocated towards kings, jarls, men of great station, that they give rings in order to bolster their folk, or bolster their men, but also to bring them in together in oath. So he says, on Grani rode the giver of gold, where my foster father ruled his folk. Best of all, he seemed to be the prince of the Danes when the people met. So she is of the east, and she is of the Gotlandic, and he is of the Danes. Happy we slept, one bed we had, as he, my brother, born had been. And there's a reason why she says that. She's saying, like my brother, we slept together, meaning they did not have relations. And this, again, was important at the time, and clearly making reference to the fact that brothers and sisters are not intimate, but more so is that they weren't married yet. So he, even though they shared the same bed, made no inappropriate advances from that. And this is, again, another sign of his noble nature. 8 were the nights when neither their loving hand on either laid. Yet Guðrún reproached me, Gjuki's daughter, that I in Sigurd's arms had slept. And then did I hear what I would where hid, that they had betrayed me in taking a mate. So again, referencing the fact that Guðrún, well, and it's in reality, it's Guðrún's mother, tricked Sigurd and took him in. They were married before she could ever realize what was going on as she was waiting for him. So she says that the betrayal starts there first, because they stayed together, did not go any advances, and they were intending for marriage. Ever with grief, and all too long are men and women born in the world, but yet we shall live our lives together, Sigurd and I. Sink down, giantess. Go into the earth, go into the mound, leave me alone. But I like this line here, ever with grief and all too long are men and women born in the world. It's very dark. Obviously, the story and all of the stuff we've covered kind of gives a peek into the reflection of why she thinks this way. But also, too, I think the attraction to tragic and forlorn love. The very same things that we find in Romeo and Juliet, or in just very powerful love songs, still alive and well in this time. But then she tells her to kick rocks. And there are some other spots here coming up where there are missing lines. Hild the helm. Oh, wait a minute. Did I go backwards? Oh, no, that's the end of it right there. At 14, the stanza 14. So kind of cuts off very abruptly as she's making her way. Oh.
Sorry, I forgot that Nick had muted me. While we are transitioning here, want to recognize Leroy in Michigan, who donated $100 towards Phrasehoff. Thank you so much. And Gilbert in Georgia for donating $150 to Phrasehoff. Hail Frere. See y'all at the dedication. I look forward to seeing you there. And thank you very much for your generosity. We appreciate you. Something that I wanted to, couple of things that I wanted to mention about this short piece that I think is, I think is informative to our religious practice. One of the reasons we read all these things isn't just the story that it's presented, but the way it's presented and the points of reference and the backdrop that it paints of the understanding that our folk had with life, with their values, with the afterlife, with how the mechanics of their all-encompassing faith worked. The idea of the hell road, the idea that it's not like, boom, you die and then you're resurrected in a heavenly realm kind of thing. It's a process. And it's like a journey that occurs. The imagery in that with be they wains or ships or whatever it might be, it's like you were going on a journey from the land of the living into the land of the dead. And we see imagery with the Valkyria and with cremation and other things, the idea of hastening that journey by being snatched up out of this life and taken kind of directly, if you're playing the chutes and ladders and you get on the little extra square that kind of gives you a shortcut. And there is shortcuts through ascension, but for the vast majority of those who pass, there is this process. And I think that something else that's inherent in the poem is the idea that there is a reconciliation thing in the process to where you account for certain things or you face certain challenges and, have to come to grips with the circumstances of your life, the circumstances of your passing, and the things that go on that way. And I think that, there's just these subtle clues in this piece that I do think are important. There's also the implication at the very end in the last stanzas that, her and Sigurd get an opportunity to reunite in that afterlife and to get another chance to see how things are going to go at that point. So I think those are tantalizing. I don't think they give us the full picture by any means, but they give us little glimpses into the Asatru, the archaic Asatru understanding of death, of the process of the souls traveling across the veil and of what that kind of looked like, what that implied. I think that's really important. And I think it's a special element of our faith that doesn't get enough focus or enough attention paid to it. So it's little, but I think it's cool, but it's too short to do a whole episode on.
Right.
So, that's why I wanted to do a few more this evening. I don't want to just pack them in. I know that some of these at the end are a little bit tedious. I know that a larger audience is typically more excited about the big meaty pieces about the gods. And I think those are really, really important. So I get that. But I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone when you don't read these often overlooked poems in the Eddas.
Well, and those little things like when she says, you know, I was unwillingly taken out of the swan skin, and you know, I was married at 12. And so that lens, again, that the inverse of that is why, you know, why is she saying that? She's saying that because, again, she's pleading her case. And by pleading her case, she's kind of showing what was wrong, what was deemed or looked at negatively. So, but at the same time, she was not always seen as simply a wronged villain. No, she was wronged in her perception, and that was enough for her to seek total revenge. So the next one we have,
let's do this instead.
Oh,
just to break them up, because we have a couple of questions. Let's hit the questions, and then we'll start fresh into a new piece.
Okay. Yeah.
Just in case there's people who are asking that may not have the endurance to go the distance with us this evening. First one was emailed to us. Everybody out there, anytime a question strikes you, please feel free to email your questions to vns@runestone.org, and we will answer them the next show we have. We'll make sure to get to those. We have gotten a good couple of folks that regularly leave questions for us there, and so you guys are all encouraged to do that whenever you'd like. This one is from Random Funny Guy. How do you reconcile the concept of fate and free will in Asatru? They seem opposed. The Abrahamic idea of Yahweh being omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent appears to have the same problem in terms of predestination versus free will. Are the Aesir all omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent? So a couple of questions in there. It's fun. You want to take first swing at those?
Okay. Yeah. And usually answering from like the last and then working backward firstly is no, the Aesir are not omnipotent, but their power is far greater, I think, than some people may perceive. And when we talk about the gods and powers, I think a lot of people try to ask or comprehend how if the gods are able to use primordial forces, then who created those forces? And it keeps going back into these kind of blurry, undefinable what ifs. And I think that the biggest defining point is after the tripartite of Yggdrasil and Ymir and Adumla, there is a great stratification of these wills all interacting with the primordial forces that are often caused by movement. I think movement, sound, and light are the products of these things. Now, we in the mythos stories will say it is an ocean or a weapon, painting concepts with words and ideas that are understandable, but the reality of this being that they are primordial and cosmic and so beyond comprehension that bringing them into focus in via a vehicle or a color or an animal are ways for us to better understand modes. So when we look at the gods, it's hard for when it comes to, like, say, Christians who have made Yahweh so undefinably omnipotent and blurred. You go back into the Old Testament, it's very, very clear. It's pretty straightforward. And you don't get that same kind of sense. What happens is after Christianity hits Greece and it gets heavily influenced by Neoplatonism, that's when the identity of the Middle East starts to kind of crumble more, and you get a lot of the philosophical understandings of the Trinity, which didn't exist until Europe. Of course, you have people who argue that, but there's all of these kind of bigger concepts. Whereas with mythos and with story, the idea is that we are learning about and mapping the way the gods move around, and they are part of an ecosystem. There's not just one singular thing that makes everything, does everything, and is everything all in one. Whether internally or externally, there's always multiplicity. So the multiplicity of the gods within a area that has that which can be used, that which is we would say like fire in the land of fire, and ice and proto matter in the land of ice. But these great divine beings are in a cosmic scale, having will, and there's not just one thing that has will. And I mean, again, even Christianity kind of lies about this, is that they do believe that other things have will, but they ultimately, they're all lower than the one thing, and that thing is so omnipotent that if those things are around, it's by choice from the omnipotent. So it removes all sense of conflict and gaining ahead. So that ultimately brings me to the last part, which is will and fate. I think in Asatru, there's a lot of people who have different sides or philosophies of it. Some people may think that fate is far more prevalent than will, but we do see the balance of the two, almost as if when we see fate mentioned by our ancestors, it is that which was, that is set, that which is coming into being, and that which should happen. Skuld is dead. She is the weaver of the outcomes of will, the outcomes of deeds. And so there is a combination, but it's not completely linear. The actions that happen during the present are affected by the past, but have an outcome that is uniquely its own, and that you can change your fate. If you are doomed, you can change your fate by drastic action and drastic will. It's just going against the tidal wave of past actions, but it's not impossible. And so, if fate was so set, the idea that Lord Odin staving off Ragnarok would be pointless. And I think that that's the reason why will has far more of a presence in our outlook of fate and will. It's almost like fate looks backwards and looks into the past. And that's very important because you can, show trajectory of where things are going from the past. But there is always still will and the outcome of deeds for the future.
Yeah, I think we are conditioned in in Abrahamism, but also in modern scholarship's tendency to paint everything in absolutes. And the world doesn't work that way. And I think reality informs us the world doesn't work that way. But when we examine when we treat religion like a book report, it is much easier and more coherent to paint everything in absolutes. When you approach religion as a system of real things that exist and that shape lives, then you're confronted with all of the inconvenient ambiguities that we deal with. And I think that, we are very used to everything is black and white, or everything is gray and there's no such thing as black and white, which in and of itself is an absolute. There's black, there is white, and there is gray. And that's less clean, but it is much more real. And I think instinctively we know that. And I think it adds a great deal of the buy-in to our faith once you accept that, and then you can apply it in a real and authentic way, as opposed to pretending that everything is that clear, because it's not. So that's one of the things. There is fate and there is free will. Yes, they do have an opposition to one another. And I think that the way Svan explained it is certainly, the point. You have a very solid past, because the past has already happened. It's in the record books. We've got it. That occurs. The present is currently unfolding, and then the future, you can plot trajectories of things. And fate can be laid out for you in a smooth pathway towards a destination, or in a difficult pathway towards a destination. But it's ever changing, and the second that it's spoken, changes are put in motion that have the potential to alter it. So when you deal with a prophecy, or someone who is doing reading the runes, or any kind of divination, they can look at what, if they are gifted, they can see as of this moment where things are heading. But the act of them doing that presents you with options to stay that course, to lean into that fate, or to challenge that and try to take a different course. And sometimes that river is strong and very hard to pull against, and sometimes it's not. And I think there's a lot of factors in that. But I think fundamentally, we all understand that free will exists. There is no person that has ever lived that doesn't understand that. If we actually try to think about it and try to logic it out, if everything is completely fated and there is no free will involved, then you can't have heroism. You can't have villainy. You can't have victory. You can't have failure. You can't have any of those things if you are just conscious of being along for the ride of something that's all been laid out before you're here. That's just not how things work. And I think we all know that. I think if we didn't know that, our lives would look very, very different and a lot more boring. So the hero is only heroic because his will is very much the factor that's at play. If he has no choice in the matter, then it ceases being heroic. So I think that's really important. That is to say, but what I meant earlier when I said that both things exist, there are people that are destined for great things, but those people can choose to not do those things, or could be taken by some tragedy to where they are not able to achieve that destiny. And I think that we all understand the truth of that in life, and our ancestors did too. The other thing that's really important when you're examining what our ancestors thought or what we think now, just because something happened a long time ago doesn't mean that the people it happened to are idiots. Our ancestors had just as large brains as you and I have. They were very smart and very intelligent people. They had just as much capacity to grasp the world around them and to make sense of things. So these weren't, simple idiots that just went along with these very fairy tale ideas. These were real people that were very well acquainted with the realities of the world around them. So yes, there's people that obviously have the hand of fate on them. There's people that have a destiny woven for them that's powerful, but that can all be affected. And that's why, and this goes to the next point, I'll get off this that I'm rambling on. The omniscience. No, the gods are not omniscient. The gods are not anything, but they're not omni anything. Because again, either they're mortal and they have no power, or each of them individually is all powerful at all of the things. That's not real. That's not how reality works. It's not how our faith works. They are vastly wise. They are vastly powerful. But our lore shows us time and again their quest to gain power, to gain knowledge, to learn hidden mysteries of the universe, to learn the plans of their foes, to win knowledge of the runes, to gain power over their enemies, to struggle against chaos. Existence, be it heavenly or earthly, exists in a constant state of movement and of struggle. And that's a fact of life and of our reality that our ancestors certainly embraced. And benevolence is a strange term to use when we talk about absolutes. And it's funny because Abrahamists don't really believe that either. Their texts describe their God as being jealous and angry and like malicious and doing not benevolent things. When you sterilize things to where something is all sunshine, rainbows, and roses, you take away a certain amount of personality. Our gods are real, living, existent entities with personality, with will, and with capacity to express their will. And I think that trying to put them into those, artificial categories it misses the reality of our gods, and it makes them caricatures of themselves. And I think that does them a disservice. I think it's the same thing when you talk about free will that's not pushed in a direction, or when you talk about, every decision you make being predestined to make. And so you're not really choosing what you're watching on the TV tonight. That's already been decided for you somehow. And you're just, following the path laid out for you and whatever. It's not how it works. And again, I think we all know that that's not how it works. What's interesting is the interplay between those things. And I think that is what creates a lot of the drama is you have currents of fate working against you sometimes, like working against a hero oftentimes. You have places to where other forces are trying to make that hero end up, and sometimes he can't escape that fate. Sometimes he's able to slip one trap only to fall into another because the pull of that destiny is so powerful. But the fact that there's a story to be told is because there is will. It's because the hero is trying to act against that and to alter his fate in some way. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's insurmountable. But that entire struggle tells you that all of those small actions in between are certainly expressions of free will. But no, that's a question that we get often in one way or another. And I think that the early Romantic era scholars on the subject treat Asatru and our ancestors as some kind of a historical curiosity and not as a like living faith that real people actually practiced. So they really lean into absolutes. And this is one of the ones that I think has damaged people's perception of, how Asatru was conceived in our ancestors' time. Next up, go ahead.
There's an extension question to this in the chat. And I also had one other thought because of what you were saying. Every time it was ever mentioned, say that the warrior was saying our fate was woven, that wasn't an omission of free will, which is like exactly what you're saying. It just made me think of like instances in literature where it's not that they didn't believe that free will existed, but generally they would say it when they were in perhaps what they viewed as their final battle. It was that all of our free will and all of our actions and everything that we have done has led us to here. And now we are truly tied in, where, it's, I think people have perceived that to mean that that's the way our ancestors saw about everything. But the other part that's kind of interesting is there was a question in here about Skuld and Shield. I'm trying to see who wrote it. But the idea that if there's any etymological connection between shield and Skuld, and there is, the word skilled or skilled eventually became shield, means to cut or to separate. And that's, I guess, in the sense of a shield being able to separate one, the carrier from the opponent. But there's also connections to Skuld cutting the thread of someone. So I think what it truly represents is the finality of will, as it is up to the very last minute, and then things can be brought to a close. But after that's speculative Indo-European translation of the idea that skilled to separate or to break apart or to keep a division. But I find that very interesting. And of course, you see that too with like weaving and the scissors. So it immediately made me think like, I want to check out the etymology of scissors or shears. So you have shears, shields, and Skuld. And I think very much so this may be lending to the idea of the ending or the cutting or the separating of the thread. And also there was another thing I saw as well as the three, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but where there's three threads, a gold thread for highborn or nobleborn, silver threads for freemen, and copper threads for lowborn. So far as I know, I can't find anything on that other than the simple mention that heroes have golden threads. So the poetic mentioning of the fact that heroes are have nobility inherent in them before their deeds.
See, I'm wondering how that works etymologically, because I don't find the same rundown in the etymology when you go back. I don't find that same point of connectivity.
Yeah, here it says the Middle Dutch, German, Gothic, coming from the IE skell.
So it has a bunch of funny things around the skell, and I think that makes a difference, because that skell means cut, but the skell from Proto-Indo-European I'm looking at means to be obliged, beholden to, owe, to be guilty.
Oh, see. So it go,
little differences, and I say that I wonder if there is some kind of cross overlap with them that together that close that far back, but the debt, the obligation, all of those things weave in. I think it really plays to your point about the threads tying you into stuff. Once you weave yourself really tight, as they say, you paint yourself into a corner and you find yourself in the situation that you're in. And if you can see the threads that are starting to weave that snare for you, then you can alter what you're doing to avoid it. But once you find yourself in the midst of it, now all of a sudden you see all the threads that brought you there. The tighter that weaves, the more that pins you into a spot. But it's made up of choices that you make over time. Now, it's also made up of, choices other people make in relation to you. Again, other free will, the free will that's exercised against you, if it's some supernatural, hex that you're put under, all of those things, but all of those things individually are expressions of free will. So we've got one more question. I also want to say that Tyler in New Hampshire donated $500 to Phrase Off.
Whoa.
Thank you, Tyler. That's amazing. Well done and much appreciated.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Bit of extra reading. I think the confusion might be because the word shield is different than the word shield. It's SHILD, not IELD. So it's not the type of shield. The shield that means debt is not the type of shield that means a sword and shield.
Yeah, and I'm posting up kind of what I found. Oh, obviously, that's not going to work because there's a space limit on that. I'll post it up to you just to kind of.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, in the meantime, can you talk about the woad self, and is it similar to the idea of the higher self? Swan, you want to take first shot at that?
Yeah, I think, and we were, again, strangely enough, just talking about this at the Hoff. The components of the soul working together to attain the woad self. The woad self as its elevated form, perhaps as the form that Lord Odin takes notice of. But all of the components that we were talking about, just kind of going through, and their resignation of kind of falling into the soul after the leak is no longer the vessel, and carrying on to the ancestors, unless there is the attainment of the woad self, where the paragon of being, whether and I think it's cumulative. I think it is mental and physical, and also action kind of coming into its purest form. And this is something that I think we were ultimately coming through with all of the literature that we were looking at, especially Founder McNallen's book, Asatru, a native European religion, as we were seeing the components as components, but this woad itself element is kind of known and spoken of as this culmination. And what exactly is it? And I honestly don't know how to articulate what it is, but I do believe it is that kind of flare in the dark of Lord Odin's eye, the seeing these moments, especially if we're talking about in a singular moment where someone supersedes their own self, perhaps in mortality or in mind, they no longer, they in essence float above and separate themselves from the mundane to such a degree that they become a force, something beautiful or terrible to behold, that is burning bright and then sometimes cut down or taken away. But for that moment, achieving their purest sense in the moment.
In talks that I've had with our founder, Steve McNallen, on this subject over the years, and that's one of the words that I kind of veer away from a little bit because it crosses linguistics, and I'm trying to get all our linguistics to line up. So, I would call that the other self, or the oath shelfer. And I think, but because those words are cognates that mean the same thing, but it's a concept of I think you're spot on when you compared it to the higher self. And I've often described this as kind of a meaning of life thing that we all face, is the distance between the man that you are and your woad self, the distance between who you are and who you ought to be, and like the best version of yourself. And I think that there are transcendent moments, but I also think, like what Svan mentioned earlier, is true as well. It's like when the different pieces of your soul fully integrate, that actualization of the woad self or the other self is important. And I do think that you become transcendent if you can become that fully. I think for a lucky few, you have moments where you touch that, where in a moment you are integrated and you are the best of yourself at a moment of transcendence, and then it slips, back to a less perfect state. But that ability to merge who you are in reality with the best version of your highest potential is something that I think we all chase after, and is an inspirational thing for us to try to always contemplate what your woad self would do in a given situation and try to be that man. I think that is informative. So yes, I think it's the projected best version of yourself that you ought to be or that you are capable of being. And when you fit into that outline, when you fit into that and are integrated in that way, that moment, however long it lasts, is transcendent. And I think that's the idea of that self that is the fulfillment of the inspiration, of the woad, of the other, of the ecstatic godly fury of your potential. I think that's the congealment of that.
We also said something about the hammer, that the hammer is kind of a good indicator of the woad self. That as you're moving towards the being you should be, your hammer has an effect. It can a quantifiable kind of thing. The way that you command a room, the presence, or just overall. I hate to say the word, but in it, because it's been bastardized by but the aura of oneself kind of being an indicator of how you get close to your other, versus, I guess, the opposite, whatever that might be, where the hammer is a deficit or is weak or frail or insignificant.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we separate these things out in ways that are digestible. I think the lines aren't nearly as clear in the reality of our soul makeup, but I think the hammer is more visual and more of an image or a projection of that, as opposed to the fulfillment of it or the embodiment of it. So I do think that your hammer is I do think that is an indicator of what that woad self might be or might look like. You actually embodying it, the embodiment of it becomes the woad self when the hammer is fleshed out. I think that's a thing. Mm-hmm. But again, one of the things that we do struggle with is the more we try to talk about these things, words fail us when you talk about metaphysics at some point, because the concepts themselves are transcendent and outside the range of our vocabulary. With that, we've got a very short one stanza poem for you next. The Dráp Niflunga. So, Svan, is there anything folks need to know before we hit the ground on that?
Oh, it is really what this was supposed to be, or where it was kind of placed in things, is as an introduction to the Reynsmál that we read a while back as we were going through Fafnir the Dragon, Reyn, and they were kind of being atomized away from the core story. This was the introductory, but was separated simply because it most likely had a different composer. So I think it was kind of brought out of that to be looked at in that way. But that's also kind of, that's why it's ultimately short, is that it was more or less an introduction to the Reynsmál poem.
All right. Well, whenever you would like, let's give it a read. Like I said, it's short when it's one stanza.
Yeah.
It's a big stanza. It's not like one of the little couplets that we dealt with. It's a paragraph.
And this really takes place after Sigurd's slaying, and Gunnar and Hogni, the brothers of, or the sons of Gjuki, Of course, their youngest brother was slain in the process of slaying Sigurd. He was cut in twain by a flying sword. But after that, the other two brothers end up kind of gaining their spoils, and ultimately their fate lies at dying at the blade of Atli. But that's all this kind of is kind of speaking about that time. So Gunnar and Hogni then take all the gold that Fafnir had. There was strife between the Gjukings and Atli, for he held the Gjukings guilty for Brynhild's death, as she was one of the of the Huns in the Gothic lands. It was agreed that they should give him Guðrún, their sister, as a wife. And they gave her a draught of forgetfulness to drink before she would consent to be wedded to Atli. So again, we see the MacGuffin of the story, or the plot kind of convenience. But more importantly, if you look at the way the audience is reading this, or being perceived, like they're being told these things, it's again another mark of treachery on Gunnar and Hogni. The idea of someone being able to give a potion to someone to make them forget is cowardly. It's again, you're not only averting fate, you're also averting will. Both of those are being hidden from by the forgetfulness. And these things are common throughout all the poems. We spoke about the queen poisoning the horn against the hero, because this is an inverse of the feminine giving divine power to the hero, as in the sword with the Lady in the Lake, or with Gunnlöð and Lord Odin. It was an inverse, and the audience would know that, and have it would evoke emotions. Well, in this case too, the audience is hearing them giving off these potions, which seem to source from their mother, and her knowledge of it, but it's simply just, again, nefarious, dastardly, to be able to try and want to just remove yourself from all the things that you have done. And giving their sister over to Atli is kind of, again, dastardly. They're the Gjukings, according to kind of like mapping things out, they're Burgundians in eastern France, and Atli and the Gothic kingdoms are kind of in what would be currently Austria, and all the way over to the Black Sea. So they're kind of also doing that to get rid of her, because she knows that they were plotting to kill her husband, and now they've got his gold. So they need to kind of get her out of there. And of course she's all torn up from all of this, and from Brynhild. And so they're dividing the spoils. So they gave her a draught of forgetfulness to drink before she would consent to wedding Atli. The sons of Atli were Erp and Eyill, and Svanhild was the daughter of Sigurd and Guðrún. King Atli invited Gunnar and Hogni to come to him, and sent as a messenger Vingi or Knefroð. Guðrún was aware of the treachery and sent with him a message in runes that they should not come. And as a token, she sent to Hogni the ring of Andvarnot, the Envarnot, the I believe this is the dwarf where the ring.
Yeah, Andvari's ring.
Yeah, Andvari's ring.
That's the final piece that covered up the whisker, right?
Right. And this is kind of a re-emphasization of it. But ultimately too, and this was a common thing that happened pretty much from the migration period to the late Nordic period, was the treachery of the truce talk. Yeah, come on, we'll do a truce talk. And then it's totally an ambush. I mean, this happened with Odoacer by Theodoric in Rome, or in Ravenna, I mean, in the province. But so again, another common theme. So she tries to warn them, don't come here. And more importantly, or interestingly, is that she writes runes down, the usage of the runes, to pass messages even all the way as far back as this, which would be the migration era. She's aware of the treachery, so she sent him a message in runes that they should not come. And as a token, she sent to Hogni the ring Anvarnot and tied a wolf's hair within it. Gunnar had sought Oddrun, Atli's sister, for his wife, but had her not, and then he married Glaumvor. And Hogni's wife was Kostbara. Their sons were Solar and Snævar and Gjuki. And when the Gjukings came to Atli, then Gudrun besought her sons to plead for their lives of both of the Gjukings, but they would not do so. Hogni's heart was cut out, and Gunnar was cast into a serpent's den. He smote on a harp and put the serpents to sleep, but one adder stung him in the liver. So, a couple of things about that last part. One is they're mentioning Gunnar and Hogni and one's desire to marry the daughter of Atli, but eventually they get married, have children, but they all go to this kind of bringing of peace, and they misinterpret or don't understand the runes. I saw some other things where it was saying that the runes were somehow smudged or broken, and they couldn't understand the message ultimately. But they go there, and the major reason why Gudrun pleads for their life is because of the bloodline. She doesn't want the bloodline of her people to end. It's super important to keep the bloodline of your people going. And Atli did not heed that. And of course, this ultimately leads to Gudrun plotting his death in revenge for killing her family line. But I just thought it was interesting that he smote a harp. So he was playing a harp in attempt to put the serpents to sleep, but one bit him underneath the rib. And there's never any mention of Gunnar being a musician. But again, I think that part is playing on that. We see that a lot, even in Western stories. Like, I'm sorry, I forgot the Christian's name. The one in the lion den. Daniel, that's it. That story and the calming of the beasts is a very old story trope, or it is a thing that is very European. I think that story didn't happen And what really it was another example of Christianity synthesizing European ideals and folklore in order to push it. They did this with the Bacchanalia and the Last Supper. They did this with the manger, with Jesus being born in a manger, where that kind of goes again to Bacchus, and the idea of calming the beasts with music is throughout Greek and Roman and Germanic culture as well. So, and even still surviving all the way into the late Nordic age. So that's it. That's all that there is on it.
All right. Well, we do not have additional questions. And the next one is a little bit meaty. So whenever you are ready, if you would like to take us through Guðrúnarkviða.
All right. So now we go into
in forna.
Yeah, it's and this is of course Gudrun's lament, or Gudrun's side of the story, which has only been kind of touched on as we go around through everyone. But I love the fact that, much like the stories of Hercules amongst the Greeks, there being multiple endings, having different points of view. This was ultimately storytelling, but brought down into the discipline of poetry and then expounded on, because the audience would be familiar with the people being spoken of. I could only imagine, though, I wondered, like, if a poet is saying something from this story and someone not knowing the story of Sigurd, and which makes me think perhaps the likelihood of that, it was so low that this story, the Sigurd the Dragon Slayer story, was so widespread, so well known, that it wasn't a risk or a gamble to create those from other perspectives in the story.
That's the thing. By the time this is recorded, and certainly by the time the Edda was recorded, it's an ancient story. When elements of it were first composed, I think, is anybody's guess, but the events and the people involved are 600 years prior to it getting written down in this format. So that's a long period of time. That's us passing down an oral tradition from, the 1400s. It's a long period for this to be disseminated throughout Europe and through all the courts of Europe, through all the campfires of lords and kings. And the spread of it, when you think about it, is tremendous and, spans large swaths of the continent, but also, over the course of centuries. So it's really interesting what comes down to us when this is getting recorded in the 1200s.
Right. And I wonder at that point, these stories are spoken, and then at a certain point, they become poem. And all the details are kind of hammered out into meter and disciplined style of poetry. Or has it always, I'm a believer that it was a story before poems, but some people make the argument that the only reason why these have lasted is because they were made into poems all along. But I mean, either way, it's from the years 500 to the this poem that we're about to go over is supposedly by guesstimate 12th century. So that's a huge expanse of time. The other thing is that's worth noting, I just checked the notes, and is that there are a lot of omissions and pieces taken out that didn't survive. So there might be some choppy parts in here, and that's because of the condition of the poem. All right. Okay, so it starts first with King Theodoric, who, this name immediately is God. Oh, I looked at the bottom there, Theodoric. So this is the kind of Nordic translation of the Gothic name Theodoric. And this is, I believe, the same Theodoric that slayed Odoacer that I had mentioned earlier. King Theodoric was with Atli and had lost most of his men. Theodoric and Guðrún lamented their griefs together. She spoke to him, saying, and now we begin the metered verse. A maid of maids my mother bore me, bright in my bower, my brothers I loved, till Giuki dowered me with gold, and to Sigurd gave me. So, just to clarify too, dowry, the idea that there was property and wealth that was significant to the station of a woman, that when she came into a house in marriage, she brought with her this property that enriched the house in whether monetarily, sometimes with actual objects like weaving looms and things like that. So Sigurd rose over Giuki's sons. He became much, much better than my brothers. As the leek grows green above the grass. Again, we see that referencing that we've seen numerous times before. The poetic sense of the leek being greater than the grass. Or the stag over all the beasts doth stand. Or as glow red gold above silver gray. Till my brothers let me no longer have the best of heroes, my husband to be. Sleep they could not, or quarrels settle, till Sigurd lay at last had slain. From the thing ran Grani, the horse of Sigurd, with thundering feet, but thence did Sigurd himself come never. Covered with sweat was the saddle bearer, want the warrior's weight to bear. Weeping I sought with Grani to speak, with tear-wet cheeks for the tale I asked. The head of Grani was bowed to the grass. The steed knew well his master was slain. So I think this is a really well-written and sorrowful poem. And we've spoken about the horse, Grani, and how the essence of a horse that laments the death of its owner, that it, being so good and being able to carry the treasure of Fafnir. Grani has, as a horse, its own kind of element within the story. And she wishes to see the horse because it's the last living representation of him. And this would really get, I believe, especially if you consider how much horsemanship is important in Iceland. This being said and spoken, and the significance that horses have within Icelandic culture is significant. So, long I waited and pondered well, ere ever the king for tidings I asked. Then there's a break because of the condition, and it goes to the seventh stanza. His head bowed, Gunnar, but Hogni told the news full sore of Sigurd slain, hewn to death at our hands he lies, Guttorm's slayer given to wolves. On the southern road thou shalt Sigurd see, where here thou canst the ravens cry, the eagles cry as food they crave, and about thy husband wolves are howling. So again, all of this death imagery, and the southern road, on the road downward, I think is probably the better translation going in there. But the road of the dead, road of hell, and around him ravens cry, and around him eagles cry, and wolves are howling. Why dost thou, Hogni, such a horror let me hear, all joyless left? Ravens yet thy heart shall rend in a land that never thou hast known. So there, the intro that we just spoke about, where Hogni's heart is removed by Atli, she foretells it that his heart will be eaten and rendered from him in a land that he has never known. So when he goes to the east, few the words of Hogni were, bitter his heart from the heavy sorrow. But he speaks, greater Gudrun, thy grief shall be, if the ravens sow, my heart shall rend. From him who spake, I turned me soon in the woods to find what the wolves had left. Tears I had not, nor wrung my hands, nor wailing went as other women, when by Sigurd slain I sat. Sorry, that's actually correction. That's her speaking, saying that she did not wail and cry as other women have when she sat next to the body of her husband. But the darkness of that moment fully seeped into her. Never so black had seemed the night as when in sorrow my Sigurd sat. The wolves, and then the verse is gone. Best of all methought 'twould be if I my life could only lose, or like to birchwood burned might be. So another important thing that I think we should see is that she's talking about it would be better if she was dead. But the story continues on. She doesn't kill herself or anything of that nature, and continues on in her life. And I wonder if that's an implication towards the idea that sacrifice of life, perhaps in a situation where you are fighting off someone with imminent doom, was okay, but perhaps the idea of like trying to take yourself out of woe was seen as something perhaps not to do. So she says, best of all methought 'twould if my life could be only lose, or like to birchwood burned might be. From the mountains forth 5 days I fared, till Holof's Hrolf's hall, so high I saw. 7.5 years with Thora I stayed, Håkon's daughter in Denmark then. With gold she broidered to bring me joy, southern halls and Danish swans. On the tapestry wove me warriors' deeds, and the heroes' thanes on our handiwork, flashing shields and fighters armed, sword throng, helm throng, and the host of the king. Host being, of course, the army of the king. Sigmund's ship by land was sailing, golden the figurehead. Gay the beaks on board we wove, the warriors faring, Sigurd and Siggeir, south of Fjon. Then Grimhild asked the Gothic queen whether willingly would I, and this is, of course, it's lost in the poem, but it's lending to the arrangement of the marriage between her and Atli. So Grimhild most likely began the arrangement of that. Her needlework cast she aside and called her sons to ask with stern resolve who amends to their sister would make for her son, or the wife requite for her husband killed. Ready was Gunnar, gold to give, amends for my hurt, and Hogni too. Then would she know who now would go, the horse to saddle, the wagon to harness, the horse to ride, and the hawk to fly, and the shafts from bows of you to shoot. And so from this point, Grimhild from the Goths comes and says that Atli wishes to be betrothed and who would build a dowry for her. And of course, it's her brothers who killed her husband do this. And that's why I think that they were purposely trying to get rid of her, that they were purposely trying to separate her and send her away. But she goes and she takes a group with her and she leaves for the east. Valdar, king of the Danes, was come with Jarisleif and Amoth and Jariskar. In like princes came they all, the long-bearded men with mantles red, short mail coats, and mighty their helms, swords at their belts, and brown their hair. And so I think this here too is showing the aged men of the warriors that attended her and attended this coming to the Goths and to Atli. But more importantly, I think something to consider, blonde hair was seen as a symbol of youthfulness. And a lot of the reasons I think that culturally the Nordic ancestors dyed their hair blonde was, again, because it was a sign of youthfulness. We don't see that everywhere. We see the Germans dyed their hair red for war. So this was something kind of more unique to the Nordic people, as a child with blonde hair would get darker as they grew older. So I think that's the major reason what they're emphasizing in this is they were long bearded, and they wear mantles of red because of station in society, and they're bear weapons, and have their brown hair. Each to give me gifts was fain, gifts to give in goodly speech, comfort so for my sorrows great. To bring they tried, but I trusted them not. A draught or a draft, a drink did Grimhild give me to drink, bitter and cold. I forgot my cares, for mingled therein was magic earth. ice cold sea and the blood of a swine. So this is the forgetful potion, or the draught thereof. In the cup were runes of every kind, written and reddened. I could not read them. A heather fish from the Hadding's land, an ear uncut, and the entrails of a beast. I think one of the things is that this might not obviously be a completely accurate kind of sense of magic, but that even when we hear about the witches making the potions with the eye of newt, etc., I wonder, to what degree if this may be herbal code, but also just, again, the audience getting the idea that there's all these kind of like very significant and odd things placed in the drink. And like the ear uncut. And I wonder too if this is an ear of a grain or an actual ear, or the ear, this one was kind of interesting, but very, very hard to find any leads on. But much evil was brewed within the beer. Blossoms of trees and acorns burned. Dew of the hearth, which would be ash, and holy entrails, the liver of swine, all grief to a lie. Then I forgot when the draught they gave me, and there in the hall my husband slaying. On their knees the kings all three did kneel, ere she herself to speak again began. So she forgets, her mind gets alleviated of all the memory and sorrow, and she kind of comes through, and there's the three men there that she has kind of lost the idea of them even being there to begin with. And then Grimhild, the one who produces the potions, speaks to her. Guðrún, gold to thee I give, the wealth that once thy father's was, rings to have, and Hloðver's halls, and the hangings all that monarch had. And I believe the hangings being drapery, clothing, the things that made halls warm, and also the decorations inlaid sometimes with gold and things. So all of the furnishings of that hall. Then she speaks more. She says, Hunnish women, skilled in weaving, who gold make fair to give thee joy, and the wealth of Boothly thine shall be, gold decked one as Atli's wife. So bear in mind, the story is Guðrún lamenting the entirety of everything happening. But at this moment, Grimhild gives her this potion and then tells her, everything's going to be great. You're going to have all of this wealth. You're going to have this hall, and you're going to be wed to Atli. And then Guðrún speaks. A husband now I will not have, nor wife of Brynhild's brother be. It beseems me not with Boothly's son, happy to be an heir and heirs to bear. And then she retorts. So again, even forgetting, she doesn't want to be wed to Brynhild's brother, who is Atli. So even forgetting that, she's still having this grudge against Brynhild, knowingly for a good reason. Seek not on men to avenge thy sorrows, though the blame at first with us hath been. Happy shalt be as if both still lived, Sigurd and Sigmund, if sons thou bearest. So don't be sad, and don't get warriors to avenge the death, but live the memory of Sigurd and the Volsungs by bearing forth children, which is really kind of flawed logic in my opinion, but she's trying to trick Guðrún. Guðrún speaks, Grimhild, I may not gladness find, nor hold forth hopes to heroes now, since once the raven and the ravening wolf Sigurd's heart blood hungrily lapped. And Grimhild speaks, noblest of birth is the ruler now. I have found for thee, and the foremost of all, him shalt thou have, while life thou hast, or husbandless you will be, if him thou wilt not choose. And again, we've spoken about marriage in the royal courts, and why it was so important to gain those stations. So this exchange back and forth is really Grimhild's political movings. Guðrún speaks, seek not so eagerly me to send. Don't seek so eagerly to send me away, is what she's getting there. To be a bride of yon baneful race. Of Gunnar first his wrath shall fall, and the heart will he tear from Hogni's breast. So, prophetically speaking of what is to come when Atli invites her brothers. And this is, of course, Grimhild is their mother. Grimhild is the mother of Guðrún and Gunnar and Hogni. So she's also kind of saying, like, don't be so quick to weave me into the weird over there, because what ultimately comes of this is that your sons will die, my brothers will die, and all of this is bad. Weeping, Grimhild heard the words that fate full sore for her sons foretold, and mighty woe for them should work. She spoke, lands I give thee with all that live there. Vinbjörg is mine, or is thine. Valbjörg too. Have them forever, but hear me, daughter. Guðrún speaks, so must I do as the kings besought, and against my will for my kinsman wed. Never with my husband joy I had, and my sons by my brother's fate were saved not. So that part there, the way that it kind of should be read is that what she's saying is, never with joy will I have with the husband Atli. It's not reflective of saying she never had any joy with Sigurd. No, it's quite the opposite. But she says she has to do it as royalty beckons, against her will, but never with my husband, her future husband. Joy I had, and my sons by my brother's fate were saved not. I could not rest till of life I had robbed the warrior bold and the maker of battles. This stanza 35 is missing the front half, so I don't know if this is Grimhild saying this, that she could not rest until Sigurd was dead. Again, this is where that choppiness really kind of is the only thing that's bad about this poem. But Guðrún speaks, soon on horseback each hero was, and the foreign woman in wagon faring. A week through lands so cold we went, and a second week the waves we smote, and a third through lands the water lacked. So, kind couple of things about this. She is the foreign woman that are the outsider. But the mapping of this, going over perhaps the Danube or the Dnieper River, or going into the Black Sea, and then also, interestingly enough, into the lands where water lacked. You know, I don't know if this is accurate to geological or just a sense of, we went through the cold, we went through the rain, we went through the water, we went through the desert, kind of just showing this great expanse. But she moves eastward. And she says, the warders now on the lofty walls opened the gates, and in we rode. The men, the guards upon the parapet. Atli woke me, forever I seemed of bitterness full for my brother's death. Atli spoke, now from sleep. Okay, wait a minute. This is interesting. There it says, the Norris have waked me. The Norns, that's a misspelling on the website's part, because in the Old Norse, it's Svaumik Nilia Nornir Vekja. The Norns woke me. So now from sleep the Norns have woken me. With visions of terror to thee will I tell them. Bethought thou, Guðrún, Gjuki's daughter, with poisoned blade didst pierce my body. So he has premonition. From the Norns, he receives the premonition that Guðrún will pierce his body with a poisoned blade, which is true in the story. And I think it's also kind of more important that the re-emphasizing of premonition, the premonition of Sigurd's death and Gunnar's death and Hogni's death and Brynhild's death, all of these are repeated beforehand. I think that either the audience already knew the end result, or it was a way to let them know before the end of the poem, so that they kind of, to entice them to keep listening. How does it all play out? And Guðrún speaks after he says this. Fire, a dream of steel shall follow, and willful pride, one of woman's wrath, and baneful sore I shall burn from thee, and tend and heal thee, though hated thou am. So she interprets his dream a little differently. She says, no, I won't poison you with a blade. I will be lancing or cutting out an abscess, and will heal you despite the fact that I am hated here in your land. And I think that's interesting. She's trying to conceal, I think, ultimately what's happening, or maybe she doesn't fully believe it as of yet, but Atli is given that either way. So Atli speaks, of plants I dreamed in the garden, drooping, that fain would I have, full high to grow, plucked by the roots and red with blood. They brought them hither and bade me eat them. I dreamed my hawks from my hand had flown, eager for food to an evil house. I dreamed their hearts with honey I ate, soaked in blood and heavy my sorrow. Hounds I dreamed, from my hand I loosed, loud in hunger and pain they howled. Their flesh methought was eagle's food, and their bodies now I needs must eat. So the plants, the hawk and the hounds, all, I think, significant of the land that he owned and of course the powers of being a king, all of these great powers kind of coming back to him, where he must consume them because of his doom. But Guðrún speaks back and says, "Men shall soon of sacrifice speak, and off the heads of beasts shall hew. Die they shall ere day has dawned, a few nights hence, and the folk shall have them." So she's saying, don't worry, the Gothis will sacrifice, and they will bay the blood of the animals of bloat, and they will give the meat to the people and share it with the gods. So don't worry. Is I think this line here, she's really saying, like, you are in good graces with the gods. You have priests who are about to sacrifice the animals, and the folk shall have. So all things are aright. You shouldn't worry. But Atli speaks again and says, "On my bed I sank, nor slumber sought, weary with woe, full well I remember." And then the last part of this stanza is, of course, and terribly inconveniently gone. And Guðrún speaks back, "Soon on horseback each hero was, and the foreign woman in wagons faring a week through the..." Oh, wait a minute. Oh, sorry. I went backwards there. Oh, that's because, yes, it suddenly ends right there at the dream of Atli. But, the story kind of, this poem is, all it's doing is foreshadowing or going into detail more about Guðrún's lament, and then her being married to Atli, and ultimately what's to come, and her hiding the dream that Atli has and kind of writing it off is more indicative too that she still had plans. And this, of course, is after he kills her brothers too. And I wonder too if Atli felt like her brothers slaying her first husband, maybe he was doing her a favor or attempting to kind of win her over that way, but that didn't work. That doesn't work, especially with the moral ethics that we've seen played out. And I wonder too if it's maybe perhaps some lack of understanding that Atli, being of the East, of the Gutenish, and people coming out of the steppes of Russia, if maybe that wasn't something he fully understood or even cared about, but kills her brothers and then says, "Oh, it's so crazy. I had this dream that you were going to kill me." And she's like, "Oh, no. It's just going to lance a back boil, and everything's going to be okay." I don't know. Sorry. But that's the end of that poem.
Well, there you have it. We keep hitting this from different angles. This poem, I think, was really, some of the imagery was really, really well done, especially at the beginning. Like, there was a lot of really nice pieces. It sucks that there's pieces missing and stuff that we won't ever know, but it's also really, I don't know, encouraging and exciting that we have so much of it. The fact that that we read through this and so many of these pieces are stated again and again in little different ways from little different perspective, all these different pieces of this poem being preserved in the Edda is a little bit tedious to work through sometimes. I get that, but it's a testament to the effort put in to preserve this and have this make it all the way down to us again about a story from, I don't know, probably 500 written with characters, around that time. So having that make it all the way to us, in large part are from people like Simander, who recorded this stuff and cataloged it and preserved it for us to have. So I think that's really cool that we've got so many different little angles on it. And I assure you, we're working our way through it. We don't have too many more left. What's up?
Yeah, I just had a thought. So we just did the old poem of Guðrún, but there's another short one. Are we doing Guðrúnarkviða in Thriðja, the third lay of Guðrún?
2 weeks.
It's an 11 stanza one.
2 weeks from now we are.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if we were doing that kind of all coupled in, because this is kind of another extension of.
I mean, they all are in this section until we get out of it. I get that we're beating it to death, but we are going through them in the order that it came down to us. So I don't know, blame Simander on that. We've got, in this specific Volsung cycle, we've got 4 more poems. And then we've only got, after that, an additional 4 poems until we are done with the Poetic Edda. So I appreciate you guys working through it with us. I'm glad we're able to cover a little bit of ground tonight with 3 different pieces that I think, all have little bits that are juicy and enticing. Angela in New Hampshire donated $50 towards paying off Freyshoff. Thank you very much, Angela. We appreciate it. I do not see an abundance of other questions going on tonight. So that's kind of where we are currently at this evening.
That's why I was thinking, like, if we shot forward on that last one of Guðrún, but I don't know if the thumbnails have already been made.
No, that's fine, and we've got time to go over that. So yeah, I appreciate working through those tonight. Not a ton of questions, but is what it is, and there's nothing wrong with having an early closing time on it this evening.
Yeah.
I do want to make a plug again while there's still time to make travel plans and other things. Freyshoff dedication. Got a lot of people signing up for it. I think there will be a lot of people in attendance. You should be one of them. So make it happen if you can. It's literally a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It's very convenient for folks driving. It's right off of, Highway 80, and I forget what the other cross highway is, but it's right off the highway. It's really we're very fortunate in the location, and I think anybody who gets to go and check it out will see how fortunate we've been on it. But we've really got a nice spot, and very, very proud of it, very excited about it. Also, if you are listening to this program and you are not a member of the Asatru Folk Assembly, assuming you are white and heterosexual, you should fix that and join, not the whiteness or the heterosexuality, but you should fix your lack of being an AFA member. Yeah, we want to bring all our folk home. A lot of people think maybe one day they'll join, but waiting until the time's right. The time's right. There'll never be the perfect time, but the best time to do it is right now. Also, kind of a side thing, words matter, as we've had the law speaker mention on here. And so I wanted to, good night, sweetheart.
Good night. I'm going to say good night.
Okay. All right. Anyways, so words matter. Stuff's important. One of the things that I have heard from a number of people in recent weeks who are not AFA members is that they support us 100%. What does that mean? I'm very curious because we have a lot of fans that like what we're doing, that are generally supportive of the idea of the Asatru Folk Assembly. And, you know, they assure us like, man, we appreciate you. We support you 100%. Well, are you a member? Well, no. Then you support. So I guess the follow-up question, so are you a member? No. Well, you know, do you donate? Well, no. You mean you support us 0%? We appreciate all the support. I want anybody, though, that has that thought to think about it. If you do like what we're doing and you do support us 100%, very seldom do I have somebody say they support us like 77.5%.
93.
It's kind of an all or nothing deal. But if you support us, get on the team. We would love to have you with us. Something that I've noticed when people say that, oftentimes we will have people that don't see something close to them. And they're, you know, man, I support you guys 100%. Man, if only there was something closer to me, I would join. I promise you, joining is the fastest way to get something closer to you. And I've said this a million times, and I'll say it a million more. The way this works is everybody, it's the analogy, and I know people get tired of my bar analogies sometimes, but on a slow night, I watch over the course of hours when I was working at the front door at a bar, I'd watch, and it'd be a Tuesday and nobody's in there, but you know, every few minutes somebody comes by, look in, there's nobody there, it's dead. Couple minutes go by, maybe I'll check back later, nobody's in there tonight. If everybody who did that just went in and had a beer, it would be a hopping night.
Right.
But it takes those first few that are willing to be the only ones in an area for a little bit in order to get momentum. But momentum is how we have all of the thriving communities we have. It's how we are able to get Hoffs. That's another thing that people I've noticed. Man, but I can't join. There's not a Hoff near me. Not so long ago, like 10 years and 1 month ago, there were no Hoffs near anybody. The way that Hoffs have happened, 5 of them so far, is because we did have people that got together where there wasn't a Hoff. And by seeing all of those people there and having confidence in the community they were building, we were able to put Hoffs places. So if you're waiting for people to be near you and you're looking around for who those people are going to be, look in the mirror. That's who that person should be. And we can build around you and help you build stuff in your area. We're not yet at a point where we can send out Asatru missionaries to build a spot. What happens every place we've been successful is that we have an individual who sees that they want something in their area that they don't have, and they decide to step up and to join and to gather other folks around them and put in, you know, a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, and we will help you all the way to build something near you. But we could use your help. If you support us, get on the team. If you're thinking about it, now is the time. Also, if you enjoy the program, tell your friends about it. There's, you know, we all have these circles of friends and acquaintances that often defy geography in today's internet age. Probably everybody out there that's listening to this knows somebody that knows somebody that might be interested in joining the Asatru Folk Assembly and coming home to their native faith. Tell them about it. Spread the word. we'd appreciate all the help we can get that way. And we do have a question that popped up. Are you going to cover the prose Edda after you're finished with the Poetic Edda? So easy answer is yes, we are going to do that. Are we going to do that directly after it? I had assumed that we were, but we hadn't really discussed that. So let's, Svan and I will confer, but very likely that will come directly after. It's definitely one that we're going to cover in relatively short, relatively soon, because it is very important. And I see Svan over on the side. The prose Edda has the Gylfaginning in it, and the Gylfaginning as a singular work is very, very important. I think it's one of the best, if not the best, that we have in taking all of the aspects of our lore and putting it in one place in an explanatory format to basically explain what Asatru is, what our faith and our conception of the gods and the world and the cosmology of Asatru is. It expresses that in a very clear and very intentional way. That's, we're not picking up bits and pieces from, a bigger story about something else and applying them. It's directly, this is what, and it's written that way. Like, this is what the ancestors believed. That was kind of the purpose of that particular section by Snorri, is to recount what the religion of his ancestors were. And he was very devoted to doing that in an authentic way. So it's something that informs how we practice Asatru in the AFA quite a bit, and where we get a lot of very directly how we do things. So we're excited to get to that. And yeah, we'll likely do it right after Svan keeps nodding his head, so we're going to do it directly after we're done with the Poetic Edda. We'll call that good, and that is what we'll move on to next.
I'm itching to get to the Gylfaginning because of just like the things you said, and there are so many elements all right there that we implement within the theology of the church. So, I mean, everything from the tripartite to the wells and certain things that I've noticed other people, perhaps, more internet-y people, are trying to say that things are wrong or different, or they're moving things around. And it's like, no, it's very clear here in the Gylfaginning. And that is where we, and even down to the temples being built in order from the Gylfaginning, everything. I think it's the cornerstone of lore in relation to the theological framework, or at least the lore framework of the church. I'm itching to get at it.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's something that I'm definitely looking forward to also, because it is so very foundational to what we do. So I'm looking forward to that one. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much for being here and being such an awesome audience. Thank you very much for the folks that donated tonight and continue to donate. The progress we have made on paying off Freyshoff has been astounding. We're, over 30% before we've even done dedication. So that's really amazing. And it's because of your guys' generosity. So thank you for that. And also thank you, producer Nick, for the work you're putting in. We appreciate it. I appreciate you making sure these shows function smooth for us each and every week. Svan, it's good to get to talk to you back on here. I know we only had you on once last month. So it's nice to get a chance to talk to you, and I'm very excited to see what you are able to paint at Freyshoff. No doubt it will be magnificent.
Well, and the fact that the episode is kind of shorter than our usual is good, because I'm going to be hitting the road tonight. to avoid traffic. So I will
Oh,
most
okay.
likely be the night traveling and be there tomorrow.
Okay. Well, it's cool. I'm excited. Text me when you get there. I'm curious about what you
Absolutely.
think. Yeah, so it's working out good on that. Also, everybody, I don't know, gear up and be excited for next week. We are going to be joined for another history episode with folk builder Chris Savage. This time we're going to talk about the loyal Anglo-Saxons and their struggle against the insurgent Christianity there, and some of our heroes that stood against the tide and for brief moments in time brought their kingdoms back in line with troth to the Aesir. So we're going to have that episode. I'm very excited. His last similar episode he did on the Goths was fantastic.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an exciting one that I'm looking forward to. And that's 1 week from today. Tell your friends. It's going to be awesome. We will see you then. Until then, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA. Remember, victory never sleeps.